Jennifer Ann Arnett, Julie Ann Ernst.
Each name a victim of the 1988 bus crash in Carroll County. 27 people, including 24 children, killed on a Saturday night, returning home from a trip to Kings Island. Their bus exploding. Some children still found in their seats.
Even 30 years later, that loss, that void remains.
Carolyn Nunnally's 10-year-old daughter, Patty, was the youngest of the victims and the last to be identified. A bittersweet return to Radcliffe and North Hardin High School.
Because of my faith, I know that I was allowed to have her for 10 years. I was blessed to have her, and the tragedy would have been to never have known her.
This 30th anniversary ceremony, not only a time to reflect on the 27 who died and the 40 others who survived, but it was also a homecoming for the first crisis response team from Mothers Against Drunk Driving, who came from across the state to offer support.
My prayers for you started immediately when I heard the news about this horrific crash.
Millie Webb led the charge in 1988, 16 years after her daughter and nephew were killed by a drunk driver. Her and her husband were badly burned.
Your absolute willingness to stop, to not ever give up, to find joy even at brief moments and increasingly each day inspired me then and still does.
As the families look back on their losses, the survivors also remember their friends, a bond they say that won't be broken, despite their broken hearts that are still trying to heal. I'm not a stranger to the dark. Hide away, they say, we don't want your broken parts. In Radcliffe, Robert Bradfield, WHAS 11 News.
30 years ago today, the drunk driving crash on I-71, a pickup truck hits a church bus heading back home to Radcliffe. It was around 11 o'clock on a Saturday night in Carroll County, Kentucky.
27 people were killed, 24 of them children, in what is still considered the deadliest drunk driving crash in U.S. history. And good evening. I'm Rachel Platt. And
I'm Doug Proffitt. 3 decades later, the details of the crash and how we all came together on that weekend and then the weeks to come have not been forgotten.
WHAS 11's Robert Bradfield continues our coverage of that fateful day by sitting down with one mother who lost her daughter. She was the youngest of those 27 killed.
Yeah, 10 years old, in fact, 30 years ago today. And many of these families, we want to tell you, who lost their loved ones still remain in touch with each other and the 40 survivors. This past weekend was the annual gathering to remember those who were killed, and it's where I spoke with a mother who made it her mission to end drunk driving deaths, but as she pointed out, sadly, it has not worked. May 14, 1988, Carolyn Nunnally's 10-year-old daughter Patty on this bus on its way back to Radcliffe, Kentucky from a trip to Kings Island. Patty and 26 others consumed by fire and smoke. The bus hit by a drunk driver. The crash would become and still remain the deadliest drunk driving crash in U.S. history.
As a former school teacher, I thought, what is safer than a bus? Little did I know that they were the most unsafe mode of mass transportation on our roadways.
Patty's death led Carolyn to first become a volunteer with Mothers Against Drunk Driving. After Patty told her before her death she wanted to become a lawyer so she could make a difference. Carolyn started 2 MAD chapters in New Mexico and Florida, then served on the board and became president of the organization in 1998.
2 weeks after her death, those words just kept ringing. Mom, I want to make a difference. And she was no longer able to make a difference. I thought, what can I do to make a difference?
The bus crash would change DUI laws across the country, but Carolyn says in the 30 years since her daughter's death, more than 300,000 people have died in the U.S. in drunk driving incidents in what she calls a completely preventable crime.
And sadly, there will be parents tonight that will hear the news that their loved one is gone, the result of someone who made the wrong choice to drink and drive.
Holidays have been tough over the years, including the first Christmas after Patty's death.
And I remember just sitting there wondering, do I hang her stocking or do I not? And I said, to hang it, people will come in and think I'm probably crazy. But to not hang it would mean that I'm not acknowledging she was part of our family. So I argued with myself for quite a while and decided I would hang it.
Carolyn says a month after Patty's death, she forgave Larry Mahoney, the man who was driving drunk the wrong way on I-71. His blood alcohol level was more than twice the legal limit. He served nearly 11 years in prison and was released in 1999.
I will never forget what he did, but I hold no malice. I let him go so he would not have a hold of me.
30 years later, Carolyn still holds on to a speech Patty wrote 5 days before her death. She competed against high school students and won.
The last line was, "You must be careful to make the right choices because you may only have one chance." Little did I know what a legacy she would leave me and how true her words were.
Now, as we know, Larry Mahoney has not spoken publicly about this crash 30 years ago. Now he's living quietly in Owen County, but Carolyn says she would be willing to sit down and talk with him now.
We believe that every single impaired driving related crash is 100% preventable.
30 years ago on this date in Carroll County, Kentucky, a drunk driver caused the deaths of 27 people, 24 of them children. When he was driving his pickup truck the wrong way on I-71, he hit the church bus from Radcliffe, Kentucky. It was on its way home after a long day at Kings Island. It remains the nation's deadliest drunk driving crash. Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us at 6. I'm Doug Proffitt. The driver of that pickup truck, Larry Mahoney, was sentenced and served nearly 11 years in prison. He has not talked publicly about the crash since his release. Federal and state safety laws were also changed as a result of this crash. WHS 11's Robert Bradfield takes a look at the improvements that were made and are still being considered 30 years later.
Calling it the seminal moment in the country's history regarding drunk driving, Jefferson County DUI prosecutor Paul Richwalski says the May 14, 1988 bus crash that killed 27 woke us up to the seriousness of the crime.
Once upon a time, if a police officer stopped a drunk driver, they'd let him go home, or tell him to go home, or follow him home. That doesn't happen anymore.
Rich Walski prosecuted the case against Larry Mahoney, who was driving the wrong way on I-71 and had a blood alcohol level more than twice the legal limit. He was found guilty of 27 counts of second-degree manslaughter and served nearly 11 years in prison. Some families of the victims wanted a harsher sentence, but Rich Walski says he was limited at looking at Mahoney's previous record.
Larry Mahoney had a prior DUI that we could not refer to, that we couldn't use.
State law now allows prosecutors to go back 10 years and look for previous convictions for more enhanced penalties for repeat offenders. Since 1988, the legally impaired blood alcohol level has decreased from 0.15 to 0.08, and Kentucky now also requires some DUI offenders to install an ignition interlock system where drivers must prove they are not drunk before starting their car.
Ignition interlock is a proven way to both deter persons from driving impaired on the road, and then also as a strong punitive measure.
But Dr. Noel Hunter says more could and should be done, including requiring an interlock for all DUI offenders. Bus safety standards improved after the crash, including adding more exit doors, flame-retardant seats, and push-out windows. Dr. Hunter says the state is also training more law enforcement officers to become drug recognition experts.
We are enhancing their training, sending them through a very rigorous drug and alcohol detection program so that they know how to, on the side of the road, implement proper procedures.
All important changes, Hunter says, that could improve the likelihood of this from happening again. Well, tonight, Doug, also Hunter is calling on the state to do away with what she calls judicial discretion, meaning some judges really are not convinced that the interlock system is working, and really depending on where you get your DUI, the judges really are not aligned on what the penalty should be.
You know, you talked about the changes to the buses, even down to the flashing lights. Their visibility has changed so remarkably since 1988. The one thing it hasn't changed, though, the seat belts. That debate for years, many people believing that they would maybe cause more harm in a school bus crash.
Yeah, especially if you're on fire, too. Maybe that, you know, getting into your skin or something, or having to actually unbuckle and then remove the buckle as well could not save time, but actually increase time for you to get out of the bus. And many of these children only had to exit through the exit door because the front door was so smashed in. 67 people on board, 40 of them survived, but imagine just all of them going to the back of the bus.
All right. Thank you very much, Robert.